Julian Jules Carver had carved his life out of Marin County's rolling hills, turning scrubland into mansions that gleamed like trophies against the Pacific. Every deal, every handshake, every square foot, built it all with a grip so tight nothing slipped through. His days were a machine. Breakfast at 6, site visits by 8, contracts signed before the fog burned off. Chaos didn't get a vote. So when he crossed the wide glass hall of his San Rafael estate that Saturday afternoon, the sight outside hit him like a rogue wave smashing through a seawall, and for the first time in years, he stopped cold. Out on the back lawn, his 13-year-old son, Ethan, was moving clumsy, offbeat steps, his skinny arms flapping like a kite caught in a gust. Beside him was Maria Delgado, the cook and housekeeper who'd been a shadow in the house for 8 months, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her feet gliding over the grass with a grace that didn't belong in an apron. Ethan tripped, his sneaker snagging the turf, and instead of a groan, a laugh burst out of him, clear, wild, the kind Jules hadn't heard since Sarah's voice used to echo through these halls. 5 years since the crash, 5 years since Ethan had stopped running to him with scraped knees or dumb jokes, and now this a sound that cracked the silence wide open. Jules blinked hard, half sure the sun glinting off the bay was messing with his eyes. Maria wasn't just humoring Ethan, she was directing him, her hands firm as she nudged his shoulder square, her voice cutting through the breeze. "Chin up, me feel it." Ethan nodded, tried again, and that laugh rang out once more, raw and alive. A chill crawled up Jules's spine, not from the wind, but from something sharper, irritation maybe, or unease. This wasn't right. Some woman he'd barely spoken to, some hired hand he paid to scrub pots, was reaching into his kid's world in a way he hadn't managed to in years. Who the hell did she think she was? He shoved the patio door open, the hinges squeaking as his boots hit the stone path. The air carried salt from the coast and the damp bite of cut grass, but all he could focus on was them. Ethan spinning, Maria stepping in time, like they'd been at this forever. Ethan saw him first, his grin vanishing, his shoulders curling in like he'd been caught sneaking candy. Maria didn't blink, just wiped her hands on that faded apron and turned, her brown eyes locking on his without a flinch. "What's going on out here?" Jules asked, his voice low, clipped the tone he used to shut down a shaky negotiation. Ethan shuffled his feet, staring at the ground, but Maria answered, calm as if she'd rehearsed it. "He wanted to learn some moves, sir," she said, simple and steady, like that explained the whole damn thing. "Moves?" Jules echoed, his gaze shifting to Ethan. "Since when?" Ethan mumbled something, barely audible. "A while, I guess." Jules' jaw tightened. A while. The kid hadn't run to him with a story or a scraped elbow in years, and now he was out here laughing with her. "And you're just what, playing dance coach?" he said, turning back to Maria. She shrugged, unruffled. He asked, I said yes. He exhaled hard, the irritation simmering hotter now. "I need a word," he said, jerking his head toward the house. Alone, he didn't wait for her to follow, just turned and strode back inside, the door slamming shut behind him. But as he crossed the threshold, he caught it out of the corner of his eye. Ethan leaning close to Maria, whispering something quick, her giving a small nod back. Their heads bent together like they shared a secret he wasn't part of. The unease hit harder then, sinking into his bones like the fog rolling off the bay. Whatever this was, it wasn't just dancing, and he was damn well going to find out what she was hiding. Jules Carver didn't let the unease settle. The patio door slammed shut, and he was already moving, his boots thumping against the polished hardwood as he cut through the San Rafael estate to his office. It was a corner room with a wall of windows facing the bay, the kind of view that sold houses for millions. But today, he barely saw it. Framed blueprints of his Marin County projects hung like metal strip malls, waterfront condos, proof of a life he'd built brick by brick. He dropped into the leather chair, its familiar creak cutting through the quiet, and stared at the desk. His fingers twitched, itching to do something, call someone, dig up answers. This wasn't a shaky deal or a contractor cutting corners. This was his house, his kid, and he was out of his depth. He yanked open a drawer and pulled out Mariah's filet, a few pages stapled together, the bare minimum he'd scanned when she'd started 8 months ago. 31 East LA roots, a diner job, a cleaning gig in Oakland. Nothing jumped out, nothing waved a red flag. She was a ghost on paper, just another pair of hands to keep the place running. But out there on the lawn, she'd been more her steps, smooth, deliberate, like she'd spent years perfecting them. And Ethan had laughed. That wild, unguarded sound Jules hadn't heard since Sarah was alive. Since the kid used to barrel into his arms with mud on his knees and stories spilling out. Now he was laughing with her, and Jules hadn't even known he could still do that. The thought twisted in his gut, sharp and cold. He'd done everything he could after Sarah kept the bills paid, kept Ethan in a big room with a view of the hills, kept the world from crashing in again. He'd thought routine would hold them together, that if he locked everything down tight, Ethan wouldn't fade away like he had those first few months, staring at the empty chair at dinner. But today, stumbling through those moves with Maria, Ethan had looked alive, really alive, and Jules hadn't had a damn thing to do with it. He scrubbed a hand over his jaw, the stubble biting his palm. Get it together, he muttered, but the words felt hollow. He grabbed his phone and scrolled to Tommy Rui's number. Tommy was an old real estate hound, the kind of guy who could smell bullshit through a concrete wall. They'd met years back when Tommy bailed him out of a bad land deal in Sausalito, some slick-talking developer trying to offload a flood zone. Tommy had sniffed it out, saved Jules a couple million, and they'd been solid ever since. "Yo, Tommy," Jules said when the line clicked, keeping his tone light despite the churn in his chest. "Need a favor. Off the radar. Run a name for me, Maria Delgado, 31, East LA. Deep dive. Whatever you can get." Tommy's gravelly laugh came through. "What, you buying a new property or sniffing out a tenant?" "Just tying up a loose end," Jules said, glancing at Maria's file. Quietly. "Got it, man. Couple days. You're springing for beers after." "Always do." He hung up, the call doing nothing to loosen the knot inside. If anything, it tightened. Hitting speed dial felt too familiar, too much like business when this was anything but. He pushed out of the chair and headed downstairs, the house silent except for the faint hum of the AC. Ethan was sprawled on the living room sectional, a Spider-Man comic open on his lap, his sneakers still wet from the grass. Jules leaned in the doorway watching them. The kid's face was soft, a little pink from the sun, a half-smile lingering like he was still out there dancing. "Hey, bud," Jules said, stepping in. "You good?" Ethan looked up, startled, then nodded. "Yeah, just reading." Jules sat on the armrest, hands clasped. "What was that out there with Maria?" Ethan's cheeks flushed. He shrugged, eyes dropping to the page. "She's teaching me some dance stuff. It's no big deal." "No big deal?" Jules forced a grin, but it felt stiff. "Since when do you dance?" "A while, I guess," Ethan mumbled, flipping a page he wasn't reading. "She's cool. Makes it fun." Jules nodded, the words sticking like gravel in his throat. "A while. Months, maybe." And he'd missed it, too busy signing leases and chasing deadlines to see his own kid light up. Ethan used to barrel into him with every little thing, crayon drawings, a loose tooth. Now he was keeping secrets with the cook. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jules asked, quieter, the question heavier than he meant it to be. Ethan's fingers tightened on the comic. "Didn't think you'd care," he said, barely audible. "You're always gone or something." It hit like a sucker punch. Jules opened his mouth. Here, I care. I'm not gone," but nothing came out. Ethan wasn't wrong. He'd been out there, building walls to keep them safe, while the kid was in here, slipping away. He cleared his throat, stood. "All right, just don't tear up the lawn. Okay?" Ethan smirked, a flicker of the old hymn. "Promise." Jules drifted to the kitchen, the air thick with the ghost of garlic and cumin from whatever Maria had cooked. She was at the sink, scrubbing a skillet, the radio humming a salsa tune low and steady. Her sleeves were rolled up, water dripping down her arms, but she didn't turn as he walked in. She knew he was there, her shoulders stiffened just enough to give it away. "We need to talk," he said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. She set the skillet down, wiped her hands on a towel, and faced him. "About Ethan?" "Yeah," he said, holding her gaze. "What's your angle?" "Teaching him to dance, that's not what I pay you for." "No angle," she said, calm as the bay on a still day. "He asked me to. Wanted to try something new." "And you just said yes?" Jules pressed, his voice edging up. No heads up to me? She tilted her head, studying him. He's a kid, Mr. Carver, he asked. I listened. Maybe you should too. The air went taut, the salsa beat fading into a crackle of static. Jules stared at her, her steady eyes cutting through him like a blade. Most people, contractors, clients folded when he pushed, not her. I don't like surprises in my house, he said, low and hard. If something's up with my son, I should know. Then ask him, she said, sharper now. He's right there, you weren't looking. The words landed like a slap, cold and true. Jules felt the ground shift under him, like a deal he couldn't close, a foundation cracking before the ink dried. He wasn't just mad Shed seen what he hadn't, called it out plain as day, and it burned. He turned, staring at the sink, the drip of the faucet loud in the silence. Ethan had been right there, fading, and he'd missed it, missed the kid who used to need him, who didn't anymore. This isn't over, he said over his shoulder, voice rough, and walked out. She didn't reply, just picked up the skillet again, the scrape of the sponge chasing him down the hall. 2 days crawled by, each one heavier than the last. Jules kept moving, site visits, calls with investors, but his head stayed stuck on that lawn, on Ethan's laugh, on Mariah's too calm stare. When Tommy called, it was late, the bay outside a smear of black under a bruised sky. Got your girl, Tommy said, voice rough from a long day. Maria Delgado, used to be a big deal ballet dancer out of L.A. Papers called her a prodigy, Latin fire, all that. 10 years back, she was set for some Europe tour. Then her fiancé gets smoked by a drunk driver a night before the big show. She ghosted after that. Jules gripped the phone, knuckles white. Nothing since? Nope, Tommy said. Clean slate. Guess she's been bouncing around gigs like yours. Thanks, Tommy. Beer's on me. He hung up and pulled up the email. Tommy sent a scanned article. Photo blurry but unmistakable. Maria, mid-20s, mid-leap on a stage. White tights and a fierce calm in her eyes. The headline sang about talent. A star on the rise, then nothing. Jules leaned back, the chair groaning. A ballet prodigy chopping onions in his kitchen. Why here? Why Ethan? He needed answers, and he wasn't waiting. That night, he found her in the pantry, restocking shelves, the air thick with cumin and dried peppers. Maria, he said, blocking the doorway. She turned, a jar of paprika in hand, and waited. I know who you are, he said, cutting to it. The dancer, the one who ran. Her grip tightened on the jar, a flash of something surprise maybe crossing her face before it settled. Figured you'd dig, she said, setting it down. You don't let things go. Damn right, he said, stepping closer. Why'd you quit? And what's this got to do with my kid? She leaned against the shelf, her guard slipping just enough to show the cracks. I didn't quit. I broke. Dance was my life, me, and Adrian, my fiancé. We grew up together, trained together, had a shot at the world. Europe tour. Biggest break would ever get. Night before, he's walking home, and a truck takes him out. Drunk bastard didn't even stop. Adrian was gone, and I couldn't hear music without bleeding inside. So I ran. Took jobs like this. Kept it quiet. Jules stayed silent, the weight of it filling the room. And Ethan? He pressed. She looked up, eyes locking on his. He's like I was stuck, scared to feel. I saw it day one him by that window, like the world's too big to touch. He asked me to teach him. Said he saw street dancers online. I said yes, because he needed it. You could have stayed out, Jules said. Why him? Because he asked, she said firm, and you weren't looking. The echo of that hit again, harder this time. Jules felt it ripple through him, the truth he'd dodged. She'd seen Ethan's quiet hurt, stepped in and where he'd stepped back. He turned, staring at the shelves, the neat little life he'd built. As my son, he said, voice low. Not yours. I know, she said, but he's still a kid, and he's still here. Jules walked out, her words ringing in his ears. That night, he stood at Ethan's door, the kid asleep with a comic splayed across his chest. Something was shifting. Ethan was waking up, and Jules hadn't seen it coming. Morning broke gray and damp, and over pancakes Maria had left on the counter, Ethan looked at him, eyes steady. Dad, I want to do a dance battle. In Oakland. Maria says I'm good enough. Jules set his coffee down, slow. A battle? Yeah, Ethan said, sitting up. Street stuff. I've been practicing. I want to try. Jules exhaled, glancing at the empty kitchen. Okay, he said, but you're all in, no half-assing. Ethan grinned, wide and real. Deal. The back lawn turned into a proving ground the day after Ethan's breakfast bombshell. Maria hauled out an old boombox from the garage, its chipped black case spitting out a heavy hip-hop beat that thumped across the grass and rattled the estate's glass walls. Ethan stood in the center, sneakers digging into the dirt, his forehead already slick with sweat as he tried to catch the rhythm. Jules watched from the patio, coffee mug steaming in the cool Marin County air, the base shimmering faint under a low sun. Maria had swapped her apron for a pair of faded leggings and a loose tank, her hair yanked back tight, and she moved with a focus that wasn't messing around, sharp claps, clipped orders, no room for slop. Arms up, Ethan. You're drooping own it, she barked, her hands slicing the air to the beat. Ethan's elbows sagged, his feet tripping over themselves, but he gritted his teeth and reset, swinging his arms higher. Jules took a sip, the bitter edge grounding him. He'd greenlit this Ethan's shot at the Oakland dance battle, but seeing it play out was a different beast. Maria wasn't just tossing him steps. She was carving something out of him, chiseling away the hesitation he'd worn like a second skin since Sarah's crash. Ethan's face was flushed, his breaths puffing out fast, but his eyes burned with a grit Jules hadn't seen since the kid was little, tearing around the yard with his mom laughing behind him. Maria caught Jules' stare and straightened, wiping sweat off her brow. You hanging out? She called over the bass. Jules shrugged, keeping it light. Gotta make sure he doesn't bust a leg. Or my grass. She smirked, just a flicker, then turned back to Ethan. Again, she said, punching the boombox play button. The beat roared back and Ethan launched in-step, slide, pop, spin. He wobbled on the spin, nearly eating dirt, but caught himself, sneakers skidding, and kept going. Maria didn't baby him, just nodded once, quick and firm, like that was all he needed. Weeks piled up fast, and the lawn became their turf. Ethan was out there every day after school, Maria drilling him through the foam and the occasional drizzle. Jules started finding excuses to linger on the patio checking emails, sipping coffee telling himself it was just oversight, but he couldn't peel his eyes off them. Ethan was shifting, his shoulders squared now, his steps snapping with a confidence that wasn't there before. One afternoon, after a brutal meeting with a zoning board in San Rafael, Jules pulled into the driveway and saw them still at it, the sky bruising purple over the bay. Ethan was soaked, his t-shirt clinging to his bony frame, nailing a sequence, step back, low dip, a clean jump that stuck the landing. Maria clapped, loud and sharp. That's it, mijo. That's the fire. Ethan grinned, panting, and spun toward Jules. You catch that, Dad? Jules nodded, a warm flicker cutting through his chest. Caught it, bud. Looking good. That night, over leftover chili Maria had stashed in the fridge, Ethan pulled out his phone and shoved it across the table. This is who I'm up against, he said, voice buzzing. Jules squinted at the screen, a YouTube clip, some kid named Diego King Alvarez tearing up a concrete floor in Oakland. The guy moved like a storm spins tight, footwork blurring, a backflip that landed smooth as glass. The comments were a flood. King owns this. Undefeated 2 years. Jules handed the phone back, keeping his face neutral. He's fast, he said. Yeah, Ethan said, eyes wide. Maria says I can take him, if I work hard. Jules raised an eyebrow. That's a big if. The Oakland battle loomed closer 3 weeks, then 2, and that clip stuck with Jules. Diego wasn't just fast, he was a machine, the kind of kid who didn't lose easy. Ethan was good, better than Jules had figured, but this wasn't a backyard game. One evening after Ethan had crashed upstairs, Jules found Maria in the kitchen, chopping peppers for tomorrow's stew, the knife flashing steady under the lights. Talk, he said, leaning against the fridge, arms crossed. She didn't pause. About? This battle, he said, voice tightening. You think he's ready for this Diego kid? Maria set the knife down, turned, her eyes steady. He's got the moves. Needs work, but he's got heart. That's what matters. Heart's nice, Jules said, but Diego's not some punk off the street. Ethan's 13, Maria. Never done this. What if he gets crushed? She wiped her hands on a towel, stepping closer. He might fall flat, but he'll stand up. That's how you learn. Jules shook his head. He's not you. He hasn't been kicked around. If he tanks, it could break him. Mariah's gaze hardened. Or maybe you're scared it'll break you. You keep him boxed up, Mr. Carver. He'll never know what he can take. Safe isn't alive. The words cut, deep and clean. Jules glared, his jaw locked. But he couldn't argue. She pegged him, seen the walls he'd built to keep Ethan from cracking like he had after Sarah. Maria had torn them down, and it scared the hell out of him. He turned, staring at the counter, the peppers sliced neat and red. Don't push him too far, he said low. He's still mine. He's pulling, she said. Not me. The next day, Diego made it personal. Ethan trudged in from school, quieter than usual, his backpack thudding to the floor. Jules was in the living room skimming a contract when Ethan flopped onto the couch, staring at his phone. What's up? Jules asked, setting the papers aside. Ethan hesitated, then slid the phone over. Instagram, Diego's handle, a crown emoji, and a message. Heard you're stepping up, rich boy. Don't waste my time. King don't lose to newbies. Jules read it, his grip tightening. He's fishing for you, he said, handing it back, trying to get it in your head. Ethan bit his lip. What if he's right? What if I'm not good enough? Jules leaned in, locking eyes. Guys like that only talk when they're nervous. He's sweating you, bud. You've got something he doesn't see coming. Ethan blinked, a spark flickering back. You think? I know, Jules said, clapping his shoulder. Prove him wrong. That lit Ethan up. Next day he hit the lawn harder, his moves tighter, like Diego's words had flipped a switch. Maria saw it. She added a double spin to the routine, a move that had Ethan tripping over himself for hours. But he didn't quit. Jules watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, the worry still simmering, but tangled with a grudging respect. The kid had fight. Then the rain came. A week before the battle, a storm rolled in off the Pacific, thick and gray, turning the lawn into a muddy swamp. Jules figured they'd pack it and move to the garage, wait it out. But when he pulled up that evening, headlights slicing through the downpour, he saw them. Ethan soaked to the bone, hoodie plastered to his back, sliding through the routine in the muck. Maria stood under an umbrella, shouting over the roar. Balance, Ethan! You slip out there. You're toast. Ethan went for the double spin, his foot snagged in the wet grass, and he went down hard, mud splattering his face. Jules stepped out onto the patio, rain drumming the awning, ready to call it quits. But Ethan was up, wiping his eyes, starting over. Jules moved forward, the rain soaking his cuffs, his boots sinking into the edge of the lawn, then stopped. Ethan didn't need him. Not now. He spun again, slipped, fell, stood, tried once more. The fifth time, he nailed it tight, clean, landing steady in the slop. He froze, chest heaving, then grinned through the water streaming down his face. Maria tossed him a towel, her voice cutting the storm. That's it. You're ready. Jules stood there, rain dripping off his jacket, the cold sinking into his skin. Ethan wasn't just dancing, he was clawing his way up, unbroken, and it hit Jules hard. Ready? Maybe. Diego was still out there, a shadow Jules couldn't shake, slick, seasoned, a crown he wouldn't drop easy. That night, after Ethan showered off the mud and crashed, Jules found Maria in the garage, wiping down the boombox. You think he can take Diego? He asked, voice low. She looked up, hands stilling. He's got a shot. Diego's smooth, but Ethan's real. That's something. And if he loses? Then he loses, she said, shrugging. But hell no, he fought. Most don't get that far. Jules didn't push. Ethan had stood up in that rain, faced the mud, and come out stronger. The battle was coming, and win or lose, the kid was stepping into it. Jules just hoped he could watch it without breaking. The Oakland warehouse pulsed like a living thing, its concrete walls soaked in the stink of sweat and cheap beer. Battle night had drawn a crowd, kids in hoodies and ripped jeans packed the folding chairs, their phones flashing, filming every flick and spin. Graffiti streaked the walls, jagged under flickering industrial lights that threw shadows across the floor. Ethan stood near the edge, lacing his sneakers tight, his hands shaking just enough to catch Jules' eye. Jules watched from a few feet back, arms crossed, his jacket still damp from the drizzle outside. The drive over the Bay Bridge had been quiet, Ethan's knee bouncing the whole way, the weight of it pressing into the silence. Maria crouched beside Ethan, her voice low and steady as she tugged his hoodie straight. "Breathe, mijo," she said, her hand firm on his shoulder. "You've done the work, just let it out." Ethan nodded, exhaling slow, his eyes darting to the floor where a couple of dancers traded Movis quick pops, a spin, a backflip that yanked cheers from the crowd. Jules shifted, his stomach nodding. This wasn't the muddy lawn anymore. This was loud, raw, and real, and Ethan was walking into it solo. The announcer, a lanky guy with a mic and a backward cap cut through the rumble. Next up, a new blood Ethan Carver. Stepping into the ring. The crowd buzzed, some clapping, some leaning in to judge. Ethan swallowed, glanced at Jules, then Maria. Jules gave a short nod, the kind he'd used to send crews out on a build. "Go," he said, barely audible over the noise. Ethan stepped up, the light slamming into him, turning his sweaty hair into a halo of nerves. The beat dropped, deep, thudding, a track Jules didn't know but felt in his bones. Ethan took the center, the crowd closing in, and for a beat, he froze, shoulders locked, eyes wide, like a kid caught in a spotlight too big. Jules clenched his fists, ready to yank him out if it crashed. Then Ethan moved at a step, a slide, his arms snapping sharp and clean. The crowd shifted, heads nodding as he hit the rhythm, step back, dip, that double spin he'd bled for in the rain. His foot slipped once, a wobble he barely caught, but he kept going, raw and alive. Every move told something lost, fight, a kid clawing his way back from the dark. The music climbed and Ethan hit the finish, a low slide into a freeze. One hand braced on the concrete, head tilted like he'd claimed it. The crowd exploded, whistles and yells bouncing off the walls. He stood, chest heaving, searching the faces, Jules first, then Maria. Jules was up, clapping hard, a grin breaking through he couldn't stop. Maria nodded, small but fierce, her eyes glinting with pride. Ethan wiped his face, a shaky smile cutting through, and for a second, Jules thought that was it, win or lose, the kid had done it. Then the announcer roared again. "Now, the reigning champ, Diego King Alvarez." The air shifted, the crowd parting as Diego strutted out tall, lean, all edge in a black tank and chains, his sneakers scuffing the floor like he'd owned it already. He flicked a smirk at Ethan, then launched into his set. The beat switched faster, meaner, and Diego flowed like a blade. Spins coiled tight, a backflip landing without a hitch. Footwork so fast it blurred into a fight. The crowd went wild, screaming his name, phones flashing like lightning. Ethan watched, his grin fading, hands balling up at his sides. Jules felt a tooth gap yawning wide between Ethan's heart and Diego's polish. Diego ended with a spin into a one-handed freeze, his smirk locked on Ethan as he stood. The crowd lost it, and Jules' gut sank. He glanced at Maria, her face blank, arms crossed tight. "He's a machine," Jules muttered. "He's arrogant," she said, eyes on the floor. "That's his crack." The judges, a trio of grizzled dancers at a wobbly table, scribbled notes, the weight dragging like wet cement. The mic crackled. "Winner this round, Diego Alvarez." Cheers swallowed the rest. Diego raising a fist like it was routine. Ethan's head dropped, his shoulders slumping, and Jules felt a stab, not anger, but a quiet ache. He started toward him, but the announcer cut in. "Wait up, we've got a special call, Best Raw Energy, for bringing it real. Goes to Ethan Carver." The crowd clapped again, steady if not loud. Ethan blinked, lifting his head as a judge slipped a bronze medal around his neck, small, scratched, but his. He held it, staring, then looked at Jules. Jules nodded, clapping slow, the pride swelling back despite the loss. Backstage, Ethan unlaced his sneakers, the medal dangling, his breath still ragged. Diego sauntered over, twirling a water bottle, his smirk softer but there. "Not bad, newbie," he said, eyeing Ethan. "Might be trouble next time." Ethan looked up, a grin tugging back. "Next time, I'm taking you out." Diego laughed, short and real. "We'll see, rich boy." Then his eyes slid past Ethan to Maria, who just stepped up. Didn't expect you back here, he said louder, the smirk gone. Jules frowned, closing the gap. What's that mean? Diego turned to him, then back to Maria. Ask your coach. She didn't tell you? Maria's jaw tightened. Diego? Nah, he cut in, stepping up. Tell him, Maria. Tell him how you ditched me. The room went quiet, the crowd's hum fading to a drone. Jules stared, the pieces slamming together. Coach? He said, voice low. What the hell's he talking about? Maria exhaled, slow and heavy, her eyes flicking between them. He's right, she said finally. I trained him. 4 years ago, Oakland. After I quit ballet, I started over street dance. Diego was my first kid, had the spark, no focus. I got him his first win, pushed him hard. Then he got big-headed, skipped practice, ran his mouth. I told him clean up or I'm gone. He didn't. So I left. Diego snorted. You bailed, dropped me cold before regionals. I had to scrape it together solo. And you did, she said steady. You're king now. Don't play like I broke you. Jules' head reeled. Maria Diego's coach? The prodigy who'd fled LA hadn't just washed up in his kitchen. She tried to rebuild, to pass on what she'd lost, and walked away again. You knew he'd be here, Jules said, turning to her. Why keep it quiet? Didn't matter, she said, meeting his eyes. This was Ethan's fight, not mine. I saw Diego in him the fire, the hunger. But Ethan's different. He listens. He's got what Diego tossed out. Diego laughed, bitter. Keep dreaming. You're still running. Maria just got a new pet now. Maybe, she said, unflinching. But he's not you. Diego shook his head, chucked the bottle aside, and stalked off, the crowd swallowing him. Jules stood there, the truth sinking in slow and heavy. Maria hadn't stumbled into Ethan. She had chosen him, seen a chance to fix what she'd left broken with Diego. And Ethan had lost. But he'd faced the king and walked away with a piece of himself he hadn't had before. Jules turned to her, the words sticking for a second. You should have told me, he said low. Yeah, she said, shrugging. But it's done. He's what counts. Jules exhaled, his mind churning. He'd misread her, thought she was meddling, overstepping, when she'd been building something he couldn't. Ethan hadn't just danced. He'd fought, fallen, stood up. And Jules had spent years gripping tight, keeping the world out, thinking that was enough. It wasn't. Not till now. Outside, the rain had thickened, drumming the pavement, smearing the warehouse lights into streaks. Ethan stepped out, metal tucked under his hoodie, his steps light despite the loss. Jules put a hand on his shoulder. How you feeling? Ethan thought, then shrugged. Good. I didn't win, but I held my own. Jules chuckled, rough but warm. You did more than that. You were tough out there. Maria trailed behind, umbrella folded, rain soaking her hair. Jules caught her eye. He's got guts, he said. You gave him that. No, she said, soft but sure. He had it. I just pointed the way. They climbed into the car, the rain tapping steady on the roof. Ethan leaned up from the back. Next year, he said, voice cutting the quiet, I'm coming back. Diego's done. Jules glanced at him in the rear view, that fire still flickering in the kid's eyes. Yeah, he said, a rare smile breaking loose. You training him for it? He asked Maria. She looked out at the wet night, then back. If he's in, I'm in. We're not done yet. The engine growled awake and they pulled out, the warehouse fading into the rain. Jules kept his eyes on the road, but his head was on Ethan, the kid who'd faced a king and found his footing, on Maria, who'd given him the shot, and on himself, who'd finally let go enough to see it. Winning wasn't the game knot tonight. It was about showing up, taking the hit, and coming back swinging. For the first time in years, they were all on the same side of the fight. This story of Jules, Ethan, and Maria teaches us a powerful truth. Success isn't about winning, it's about having the guts to face challenges and get back up when you fall. Ethan didn't beat Diego, but he conquered his fears, rediscovering himself through every shaky step, from a rainy lawn to the Oakland stage. Jules learned to let go of control, realizing love means trusting his son to grow, not just shielding him. Maria, once a runaway from her past, found purpose in lifting Ethan up, showing us healing can come from helping others. Life's like a dance. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it demands grit and a heart that dares to keep beating. So did this hit you right in the feels? If it did, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Drop a comment too'd love to hear your take.